Welcome to the Cyber Sangha podcast. Cyber Sangha is a program of free live broadcasts, launched in 2009 by renowned teacher and author Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. Join us as we draw on ancient Tibetan wisdom to discover how to connect with our best self and live to our highest potential. The following conversation, Balancing the Elements Through Breath, happened on January 22nd, 2023, as a science and spirituality dialogue with Menpa Phuntsok Wangmo, Dr. Sat-Bir Singh Khalsa, Geshe Tenzin Wangyal, and moderator Alejandro Chaoul. This was part of a year-long series, Bring Body, Speech, and Mind to Life. This content is for informational purposes only. Listeners should consult medical professionals for any physical or mental health concerns. Please use headphones and do not meditate while driving or operating machinery.
What I thought we'll do for this particular dialogue, I want to take a word from Rinpoche, from a text. You mentioned Lung Rinpoche, this aspect of the precious breath. And this is part of what we're getting from the teachings. And today we're talking about Soplung, about this life force lung, life force breath, as well as the element of space. So as Rinpoche told us, I hope you have been watching space. So you've met, everyone knows Rinpoche, but I just want to say a couple of more words as I welcome him to this stage today. And Rinpoche, besides being an incredible teacher, and as Daniel said yesterday, one of his qualities is to really bring the teachings, the Dharma, to the Western audience. And I think one of the particular qualities that he has done is to really interact with science, with psychology, with medicine, and to really be the one motivating, giving us space, as he said this morning, for these dialogues that we've been doing for over 10 years. And really supporting research in this area that we've been able to do. So thank you, Rinpoche, for all that support. And Menpa Phuntsok Wangmo, who you met yesterday also, and besides being the director of the Shangsheng Institute and all you have done really for Tibetan medicine is really amazing. Also, maybe not everyone knows that she's very connected to Namkhan Orpa Rinpoche, her uncle. And so that tradition is very alive in her, so welcome with that as well. And today we have Sat-Bir Singh Khalsa joining us. And some of you have met Sat-Bir online in our previous incarnation of this dialogue. And Sat-Bir is an associate professor at the Harvard Medical School. He's been a researcher in the field of mind-body medicine, particularly specializing in yoga therapy. And he's a practitioner of Kundalini yoga. In the area of yoga therapy, he's also the editor-in-chief of the International Journal for Yoga Therapy. And so he brings all these aspects to us. And in fact, I want to start with having Sat-Bir maybe have a 10-minute on telling us a little bit about breath and that research that has been so much part of your life.
So indeed, breathing and breath regulation is a very important part of many mind-body practices and disciplines. And in my expertise with respect to yoga, it is a pivotal practice within the yoga disciplines. And you can find this actually even in the earliest yogic scriptures. So for example, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, despite the fact that yoga is most known for the postures and exercises, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras do not have any postures or exercises except for the meditative posture. But it does have information on the breath and the importance of the breath in that experience. And then later in other, more later yoga texts, you see definite, very specific yoga breathing practices within the yoga tradition. And there are now many, many different types of breathing practices, all with different prescriptions as to their efficacy and changes on the mind-body continuum. Now, where this comes from really is embedded in the physiology of the breath and how the breath interacts with the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. And what we know, of course, obviously, that when we have an emotion or where we're under stress, our breath changes. So when we are crying, our breath changes. When we are laughing, our breath changes. When we are sad, our breath changes. When we are anxious, that's the most obvious example, our breath speeds up. And so this whole tie-in between breath and emotion is very much well known in that one direction. Now, what the yogic tradition is doing, and the other thing that's happening now in recent research is we're starting to understand how breathing actually is represented in the central nervous system. So there are regions now of the central nervous system in the brain whose activity is exactly synchronized with the breath, telling us that the breath has really significant importance in terms of our mental and neurophysiological functioning. Now, of course, in yoga, what we're doing is we're actively regulating the breath. We're changing the breath consciously. It's something that we can do as humans that animals cannot do. We have the ability to change our breath at will. And so this is the basis of all of these practices of breath regulation, which in yoga is called pranayama. Now, one of the things about pranayama is that as you practice these techniques over time, you see changes in the respiratory system. And these changes happen at multiple levels. And they affect the frequency of breathing, the depth of breathing. They affect the muscles that are involved in breathing. They affect actually the chemoreceptors, and which are chemical receptors in the bloodstream to monitor things like carbon dioxide and oxygen. But they're also changing the ability of oxygen to exchange within the system. And so we're making very strong changes over time in the respiratory system as we change these breathing patterns. There was a study done not too long ago that showed that when they took naive individuals and had them practice slow breathing for a number of months, what they found was that their spontaneous breath rate, when they were not paying attention, their spontaneous breath rate went slower and it went deeper. Furthermore, there was more emphasis on the exhale. The exhale was longer than the inhale. So as you practice these techniques over time, you're actually changing the respiratory system and its characteristics. Other research has shown that there's a direct relationship between how you breathe and which breathing practice you're using and its effects on both mood and stress. So studies have shown that just taking individuals right away, giving them, and this can happen instantaneously. As soon as you start doing, for example, slow breathing, you start to be, your mood starts to be more under regulation. You're less reactive to the mood state. You become less depressed, less anxious, less stressed. And then as you practice over time, that so-called plasticity starts to engage itself. So you actually, on a general level, become less reactive to your own negative states. Your overall mood state improves. Your overall perceived stress improves. There's also studies showing that if you do slow breathing, your pain regulation improves, not only in the short term, but also over the long term. And we're talking about years and years of pranayama practice. We see individuals have greater pain tolerance. They can tolerate pain better. And so these are direct effects on the central nervous system. But another system that is directly affected by breathing practices is the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is one of the stress response systems. And so we see that impacting almost immediately. Again, even over the short term or over the long term, you see these changes in autonomic reactivity And that is underpinning this whole idea of improved stress tolerance and stress regulation. The other thing about the autonomic nervous system is it's also the system that's involved in cardiovascular regulation. And so when we start to breathe more deeply, we see changes in actual heart rate. And this is a phenomenon called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. As you inhale, the heart rate increases. And then as you exhale, the heart rate slows down. And this is directly controlled by the autonomic nervous system, by the activation of sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. And that is significant because we know that variability of heart rate is very important for cardiovascular health. There's a whole field of research now on what's called heart rate variability in cardiovascular science. And the idea is that the more variable your heart rate is, the more healthy your cardiovascular system is. It's the opposite of what people might think. People might think, oh, I want my heartbeat to be steady as a rock, really like a metronome. Well, people who exhibit that are near death, in fact. They are prone to have a cardiovascular event. So you want your heart rate variability to be higher. And one of the rationales for that is the fact that the more variable your system, the greater the dynamic range of its activity, the more you're able to cope with challenges from your environment. Of course, life is nothing but a series of challenges, one after another. So the greater your heart rate variability, the more elastic your system is, and the more you are able to cope with that external challenge. So this is one of the reasons why heart rate variability is so important, and we know that these breathing practices have a very profound influence on heart rate variability. Now, another thing about breathing, and this was mentioned by Rinpoche near the end of his talk this morning, was that if you're in a mood state, a disturbed mood state, and we're talking about something like anxiety or depression, these can be rather pernicious and a little bit difficult to control. And what he said was that instead of trying to control the emotion itself, which may be difficult, especially if it's pervasive or overwhelming in the case of a disorder, simply change the breath. And then the emotion will change. And we know that that is having good evidence now in research that we can make that very simple transition from stress and mood to non-stress and a better mood state. And so that really represents the ease of use of these practices. And we see this anecdotally. People who begin yoga practices, one of the first things they comment about is, oh yeah, I'm starting to do the breathing at home. And every time I walk into a stressful situation, I start to do some slow breathing. It's almost immediate. It's so easy to do and so safe that, anyone can practice it anywhere. So this whole idea of ease of use is really important, especially for a mind-body practice that is so needed in our modern society. And we've seen this in our studies in, for example, yoga in the public schools, where the children come back the next day and they say, oh yeah, we were going to have a soccer match yesterday and we all started doing a slow breathing and then we all won the game. And it's that palpable and that's easy. We have younger children, anecdotes of kids coming back and saying, I was at home with my brother yesterday and we were having an argument over a toy and I was going to hit him. And then I decided to stop. I took a few deep breaths and I decided not to. And so it's almost immediate and its use is extremely practicable and extremely useful. So I think that this is a technique that really deserves widespread implementation. And together with the postures and the meditative component makes really a full and complete mind-body practice.
Thank you. Thank you, Sat-Bir. So, Rinpoche, I wanted to go from a few things that Sat-Bir said and that you had mentioned, and we did this morning, which is this ease of use of the practice. So, of course, we're going from a very deep text, but you're bringing it in such an easy way, right? So, for example, this, something that Sat-Bir also mentioned, this lengthening more the exhalation, bringing in the inhalation, whether we count 4 or maybe we can have 5 or 6, but then the exhalation being 6, 7, 8, and related to the element of space and this spaciousness, and that the connection has to do with this life force. Could you say a little bit about how as we are able to extend this exhalation and make it, start practicing that, how it supports that opening of our heart and maybe connect to the life force lung.
So, in terms of the space element, like a life force lung exercise, so that specific practice is to do with the heart. So we are breathing in, holding the breath there, movement, and exhaling out. So the idea is to clearing whatever the toxic blockages and things are there. So it's like a kind of, you pour the water in a bottle, shake it, put it down, put another fresh water, shake it, put it down. Each time bottle is getting cleaner and cleaner. So in the same way, it sends, I think, the air is like a water that clears the different energy centers. So in terms of the heart, it's associated to the space element, and heart. We always talk about opening heart, and I think clearly it plays a very important role. So I don't know a specific other question.
Yeah. Well, and also this simple breath that now you're been engaging lately of really making emphasis in the longer exhalation. If you want to talk a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so, one thing is, I think many of these ancient traditions, there's so much depth, so much richness in it, right? So, for example, life force salung exercise, it says, ultimate goal is to reach Dharmakaya state. So, and then it talks about, so many different ways it talks about, right? So many of these things is very hard to understand for people, ordinary people, and it's difficult. But I think when you talk about deep exhalation, it's because there seems like so much to clear. When I do it, based on old text, but I also try to experiment myself quite a lot. So I do feel that when you're filling up your chest area, then I feel like more exhaling from here than my upper back, my lower back, then my belly. So in the end, and I feel tight here, right? So that, and when you exhale, I do feel that, tensions in my upper back or lower back, they're definitely clearing it. Or even there's some ideas of thoughts and feelings, even just this, whatever the unnecessary thoughts, they're getting cleared. So end of this exhalation, always a resting point, I do feel that's also a very equally important way, ability to rest in that cessation, right? And when you're able to rest in that cessation, it's very hard to lose the connection to that cessation. Because immediately another thought comes, another idea comes, but when you're able to rest there in continuously 4 or 5 times, you're having deep experiences in meditation. Or when you're trying to sleep, you're already gone to sleep. You're already sleeping by that time.
Wonderful. So in the Tibetan medicine, you mentioned yesterday that sometimes you integrate, or in ancient times it was more integrated, the Tsalung practices and breathing. And you also mentioned that sometimes you do give breathings to your patients. And particularly this aspect that was discussed this morning about space and life force, or Sotzin Lung. Do you want to talk a little bit from the medical perspective? How is that viewed?
Yeah. So I think that in the Tibetan medicine we say that the Songjin Lung is located at the top of the crown chakra. Songjin means is holding the whole life system. So that is among the 5 lung. The Songjin Lung is one of the most important one. So that is also governing all the brains, all the sense organs, all the sense consciousness, and so forth. So in the Tibetan medicine, we say lepatsai gyazo chempole, so that the brain is like an ocean of all the nerve system. So since that the Songjin Lung manage well, then that all the nerve system is ideally is able to keep well. So also, as previous speaker said, we use the breathing a lot into the healing. Like just tell you one my own stories. I worked in Tibet, Eastern Tibet, remote area, totally remote area, soon after I graduated my school. And then people comes all kinds of the health issues. I'm the only one, like a doctor there. A, I don't have good experience. B, I don't have also a lot of equipment, things. And then the region is a totally remote area. So sometimes the people comes, they're screaming by the pain. I don't know, what should I do? So then I know that the breathings I learned the Nagano Rinpoche when he came to first time to Tibet, 1985. So then the beginning, I really started like pretending for them, say, okay, don't worry, I will sit next to you and we try to breathing together and then we do this way, that way, everything should be fine, sort of like flexible, you know. So I'm doing that, and then, a little bit also mentally, on a little bit benefit of the breathing, somehow is working. And then one time, there's one young boy kicked by a horse, and then totally stretched these tendons. And then that I know is not going to work with the breathing, but then because it's to get to the hospital is very far. At the time, we don't have a vehicle, so first we need to, like 7 kilometers from that where I located, to go to the main road, and then I check to waiting a car. Sometimes a couple of hours will be there, sometimes a couple of days, depend also how the road is. So if there is a serious case, try to get to the major hospital is not a good idea. Probably more safe, stay home. So this time, then what I tried to do, because that the little boy, it's, extremely pain and crying. Then I said, okay, don't worry, we do this. Now you try to thinking light, this light, that light. And then a couple of hours, sort of like probably 2 hours, then boy able to falling asleep. And then after that, we try to get in the hospital. So this kind of I do started work. And then later I came to US. I asked it to Nagano Rinpoche. I said, Rinpoche, I'm doing these kind of things. What do you think? Should I continue doing this or should not do this appropriate or not appropriate? Or just I'm making like a fig for them, continue. I don't want to continue lying, So I said, what do you think? Because in a remote area, that's the only one what I can offer. And then Rinpoche said, yes, you can do that. And then he corrected me and then he advised me. And then this kind of technique I'm doing in a Tibet remote area, but then case to case also I apply here in the US, fully developed country, but still working. So this sort of like is really working, functioning. So what we Tibetan medicine say, the nerve, not only nerve, but all the pathways in the body system is like a road. And then wind is like a vehicle. And then that vehicle carrying like passengers or drivers, that all the energies, fluid, whatever need to get some parts of the body. So this presented like the body system as like the road, wind is that the vehicle, and all the need to get up, down, included like a material aspect or energy aspect, everything like passengers. So when we're thinking that, yes, this slow breathing and then keeping little sort of like exhale slowly, keep little empty. I really related with when we eat food, always we say eat slowly, eat slowly. Eat slow is much better for the health. After eat, try to make sure it's a long gap. Don't eat constantly. Between the breakfast to the lunch, minimum try to leave 5 hours gap. The reason is to clean the systems, energy have the good rest, and then special able to clean the well. So I really see sort of like this kind of connecting. I don't have good words English to put in presented nicely, but I see this how this sort of like a mechanism working together.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
So yes, and this metaphor of the channels being the roads and the breath being the vehicle, sometimes they call it the horse, and then the passengers, of course, and part of these passengers that come on and off, right?
Yeah.
And this aspect of clearing, I think it's really important. I want to come back to this. I do want to mention two things that I want to come back to. One is the aspect of light and visualization that I know you use a lot, and I want to come back to that. But also this aspect of including it with everyday activities like eating, and how breathing and eating are really related in how we put them together as for a healthy lifestyle. So let's go to light, because Rinpoche also yesterday you mentioned about light, and this aspect of there's light as we get connected, as you were saying, Rinpoche, you look at the space and you look at light, and then that, but there's a sense of connecting to that inner light. When you mention Menpa, light as visualization, how are we using that in connected to what you both said yesterday, the sacred, the inner aspect? Is that what we're connecting, or is this a different kind of visualization?
Asking me?
Yeah, let's ask you, and then we'll go back to
I see. Okay, so I think that the light could be, at least what I see or what I think. In general, we call the sort of like the most pure aspect of the things we call dandang. So this could be one light. But also that in general, clinically, what I try to explain to the people, different lights of the colors, because when we eat food, as we said yesterday, we eating food or drinking things based on the 5 element productions. But also when we're breathing, also we don't see clearly like green, blue things, but also we're inhaling that the essence of the 5 element. For that reason, that the 5 element essence, since we're breathing, like each element has their own color, then more healthy is more bright, more shiny color. So that I consider as a light of each color, which means is when we are healthy, our skin is more shining, more bright, more clean. Same like that way that the element also, once the healthy element is more shiny, bright. So that light we try to inhale, and then try to touch to where you have the issues. Sometimes like the red color present the fire element, yellow color present the earth element, blue color present the space element, white color present the water element, green color present the wind element. So when we're looking sort of like if you need to clean up in your body system, sometimes we have a lot of fatigue, like our mind is very dull, and then practically what we do, we drinking coffee. we believe that coffee helps us. Why? Because is Tibetan medicine with coffee is a bitter taste. Bitter taste, it belongs predominant by the wind and the water element. So that's the reason coffee has power to sort of like charge energy. But other than that, we do like breathing time. We try to focus a little more the green light, focus to inhale, and that is ideally we inhaling more like a wind element, wind element, and that also can help because wind has the nature. Wind has a 6 characteristic, but one of the characteristics of the wind is roughness. So any kind of like the roughness able to clean, because when we have dirty part, there's a little rough plus soap, then we able to clean, or plus we put the hot water, then it's perfect. Same like that way that the wind has this roughness, the roughness able to clean. So in general aspect, an example, if someone has like the cholesterol, what do we, Tibetan medicine main herb we give, or main herb what we use? We use that we call the debusum, like the gurura type of like the, I think Indian they call it amla fruit. Why we use amla fruit? Amla fruit is sour, and then arura is bitter. So this sour and the bitterness, sour present the fire and the bitter present the wind. These two put together at the perfect sort of like soap to clean, like a cholesterol. So, did I'm saying correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this kind of, I think that, we try to include this light of each element.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I want, I'll get back to this roughness and cleansing and something of what we say geksel, right? This clearing away of obstacles and how light supports that. I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, I'm also kind of feel that there might be some of our practitioners thinking, well, there's some things that are a little different in the Nyingma tradition and in the Bön tradition. So I wanted to touch upon that just for a moment to make sure that we're all on the same page, even though systems can be slightly different. And yet, I know that for the Tibetans, that's not an issue, right? But for the Western mind, many times it's, wait, she said blue for space? We say white for space. She said white for water? We say blue for water. Is one wrong? Is one right? No. Right?
No.
Or she said, the Dzogchen Lung here, and we have it here.
No.
Is there a no, right?
No.
But maybe, first, Rinpoche, do you want to talk a little bit about that as, how we can integrate these things that may seem really different for some minds, but actually they're not?
So maybe I will not go into that. I will talk about your first question.
Okay.
So your first question about the light. So as Menpa said about food, even different colors, different tastes, having a different impact on different element qualities. So in teaching, like tantric teaching or Dzogchen teaching, that when they talk about the light, they talk about lights are more representing consciousness, the pure awareness. So like this morning when I was talking, I was saying warmth of light, the light of awareness, the warmth of light of awareness. So the warmth is the quality, the light of awareness is the light, which is awareness. So awareness is the light for us. And for each of these wind, like when we're talking about the life force alone, it's a white color, so it's a white light. So the heart is a white light. And the red light will be in the navel, like a true cell, the downward moving will be blue, the water, and the upward moving will be the earth in the yellow. So in this case, it will be the white light. So white light is the color. The color has something, I guess, has something to do with the dimension of consciousness. We say consciousness is one thing, but consciousness many different layers of dimension, right? So the color aspect is white. So the wind carries the light, or wind is integrated together with the light. When it's separated for us, in our practices like Tumo, we say sphere of light, when we do cleaning the channels with light. So we are visualizing 5 like rainbow light. So when we're visualizing 5 rainbow light, mind is visualizing 5 rainbow light, but this 5 spectrum of light has something to do with awareness, I think. And the wind is carrying it through the practices. The role purpose is to clean the channels. So when you clean the channel, true side channel, particularly the central channel, so when you clean the central channel, so whole purpose of idea is to bring, they call subtle wind and awareness into the central channel. So awareness is referring to the light. So light, I think it's a very important part of the whole process here.
Thank you. Sat-Bir, I wanted to come back to you, and I noticed you're all in white, so this is appropriate. And 2 things. So one, Menpa was talking how this Dzogchen Lung is not only at the crown, but really influences all sense organs and the brain. I know you have research in this area, but also you mentioned about breath, whether in the yoga therapy or in the Kundalini tradition that you practice, how much is light part with breath? Is this part of the tradition as well?
I don't have the experience in my yoga lineage or in other yoga traditions that light plays a huge part in describing the mechanisms of how the breath is working. It's not that it's not there, but the whole idea of light is there. It's associated, for example, in the chakras. Each chakra is associated to have its certain color, and that certain color is attributed to have a certain meaning. But here we're getting into, of course, the yogic scriptures, and these have not, of course, been studied, and this whole area is very difficult to study because we're talking about subtle energies, and until we have instruments that can measure these subtle energies, it's difficult from us to talk from a scientific perspective.
Well, here's a safe space to talk even beyond the scientific, so feel free.
Well, I'd like to change topics. I'd like to address something that Rinpoche just referred to now and mentioned in his talk this morning, and I think this is really critical. He said that if you're in a depressed mood state or in a other kind of mood state that's not ideal, you simply bring pure awareness to become aware of that depression, and then it goes away. And I think this is really at the core of what we're talking about when we talk about meditative practices. And it highlights an issue that crosses over into the field of modern psychology. The most powerful and universal form of psychotherapy today is cognitive behavioral therapy. And the main issue underlying cognitive behavioral therapy is called metacognition. The idea here is that the entity that you think of as yourself, is not your thoughts. They're separate. And you can separate them by simply becoming aware of your thoughts. And that awareness of the fact that you are depressed is real proof of the fact that, in fact, you are this meta entity. Meta means higher. So this whole idea of metacognition really is at the core then of when you develop that and practice that pure awareness through meditative practices, or in cognitive behavioral therapy, they do practices where they train individuals to become aware of those thoughts and identify dysfunctional thoughts. In meditation, you just practice that pure awareness, and that ultimately leads to this realization that you, that higher entity, are not your thoughts. As a consequence of that, you now have more self-control. You have the ability to change your reaction to those thoughts. They're just thoughts. That's not who you are. So that means you now have the ability, you're now a little bit more in the driver's seat. You can then say, okay, that was a very depressive thought, interesting, and move on. because you are the observer. You can change your reactivity to your own thought processes. Now, why this is so important is because it's also at the root of most psychological mood disorders. We're talking about generalized anxiety disorder, major depression. Many people think that, these things are organic, they're coming from the central nervous system. Well, actually, it's the thoughts that are the key. The thoughts are not just the symptom of these disorders. They are the disorder. And that's why cognitive behavioral therapy is so effective, because when you replace those dysfunctional thoughts with neutral thoughts in cognitive behavioral therapy, the disorder goes away. And all you've done is change the thoughts, which tells us that the thoughts are really a critical piece of the disorder itself. Now, in meditation, we do the same thing in a different way. We use this pure awareness to develop that relationship to our thoughts that's different, which ultimately leads to improved self-regulation of our own thought processes. And so you might think that, well, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the same as meditation. Well, the one thing that meditation also gives you that I'm not aware CBT has ever done is the ability to experience these transcendental states, because that's what meditation practices ultimately will lead to. You engage in the attention networks, and that triggers a whole network of activity in the brain that can lead to these transcendent states. And CBT just does not lead to transcendence. So that's to me, this whole idea of exerting pure awareness is really a critical core of these contemplative practices.
Let me continue in that with you, Sat-Bir. So when you say this metacognition, how would you connect it with what Rinpoche was saying about being in kind of this space and let go? So there is a sense of, in a way, being the observer, but even letting go the observer. Do you know where I'm going with that?
Not exactly, but I'll change topics again. So the other thing that Rinpoche said this morning in one of his talks was this idea that, and he gave the anecdote, you wake up in the morning and you're depressed. And then what you can do is look at the sky. And then that is space. And that imbues your consciousness then is experiencing that space. And then the other thing he said was that if there's space, there's no ego. So when we're talking about, this dysfunctional behavior, the mood disturbance, it's the small ego that is, I am sad, I am anxious. But if you then expand with that space and experience the sky, suddenly that ego becomes expansive. And you become expansive with that. And that puts those thought processes in much deeper perspective. And, I'm sure everyone has experienced, you go into a movie theater to a movie and you're just sitting there waiting, and if it happens to be a Western, they'll show you this huge panorama of Montana with the hills and the mountains in the background. And you just go, whoa. That's that expansiveness. That's that ego going from the narrow of, oh my God, I've had this problem, what am I going to do today, to, oh my God. And that kind of expansiveness, that is where the ego is not destroyed, but expanded. And I think that's a nice way to talk about this whole idea of space.
And that is different than what CBT is doing.
CBT is very narrow. It's really focused on the dysfunctional thoughts. You identify these dysfunctional thoughts and beliefs, and you replace them with neutral thoughts. So it's a very mechanical process. It's not a contemplative process. It's a mechanical thought regulation process. Now, it's very effective because it works, but it doesn't have these other subtleties that meditation gets you into.
Great. Okay. Menpa, I wanted to come back to the aspect of mood. And usually we think of medicine more about body, but I know, as we've been talking, the emotions have a huge impact in health. And so how does Tibetan medicine talk about mood? And maybe you mentioned already how you worked a little bit with visualization and breath. What other aspects do you bring in Tibetan medicine to shift moods or to work with moods or mood disorders?
Generally, we have these 4 therapies. We call the diet, behavior medicine, and external therapy. If the minor cases or if the single issue cases, we try to change the diet, try to change the behavior. As we said before, because our body is composed by 5 elements, and then later on, the development of the body or mental system also based on the 5 elements. And then later to maintain that the body, physical body or mental aspect functioning at what's supposed to function way, that also based on the 5 elements. And then later when we sick also something happened, imbalance of the 5 elements. So what we say, 5 element balance time, everything's good. 5 element imbalance time, then is everything change. So when we say is something that the mood change or whatever, it could be there also something, could be many things happened, but somehow either internal issue or external issue, something happened imbalanced, your own element imbalanced. For that reason, which element is imbalanced? An example, you are like sad, depressed, and then doesn't want to interact anything, not interest anything, just like hopeless way. Or you are superly anxiety, or you have depression, anxiety, whatever. Meantime, also a little anger, it became a little wrathful or, aggressiveness. Because each symptom shows there is a meaning of that symptom. Because Tibetan medicine, the symptom is very important for sure, also any other medicines. But the symptom is not that the root of the disease. Because that symptom telling us something wrong inside the body. So we try to observe the symptoms, then try to work on. So sometimes simply, we try to say, and then sometimes go outside and then sit under sunlight and then try to talk with the neighbor. So this also could be one simple therapy. And then sometimes we say, stay home, don't go out, don't put too much light, little dark place, keep warm. This is also another one. So we have different way of approach based on the diet, based on the behavior, based on the medicine or external therapy. But a simple one is, I think, to understanding a little bit that the circumstance. My teacher, the Namgyal Nobo Rinpoche, he always says, work with the circumstance. Because sometimes we have one expectation, and if that's not coming on the practically, then we unhappy. But if we able to work with the circumstance, as Rinpoche and then Rinpoche said before, then we, even though it may not able to release 100%, but we can change the perspective, So this kind of then work with the circumstance, changing the breathe, little deep breath, go see under sunlight, gazing under skies, to look at the nature of the sky, look a beautiful flower, a bird, talk something with the neighbors. All those kind of could help to change your mood. So I think that there's no single way to keep our own well-being. Our well-being is depend with the outer natures. Like if I want to be really healthy, is it the most important is you. Once you are healthy, yes, I will have potential, I will have healthy or happy as well as.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So in that area of health, and Rinpoche, you mentioned today longevity. And so I want to go into that because I think longevity, and today we were talking about the Dzogchen Lung, which is this life force. And in a way, what we're talking here what Sat-Bir, what Menpa also, when depression and you mentioned loneliness, there's a sense of kind of going in and not having that sense of longevity. So could you talk more about longevity and space and life force lung and how, is it, and maybe bring some more into the practice? Is it, do we have doses of practice that we need to think about, or how do we think about longevity in that sense?
Yeah, so longevity, I think, like we were example giving our phone. So in order to keep phone, you have to have a good phone, you have to have good charger, and you have to not turn on all the apps which you're not using. You have to have an app called App Killer, which kills all the apps which you are not in use, because they, you have to go like this. Otherwise, they keep draining the battery. So basically, the battery dies much faster than you want it to die. So I think it's very, very similar here. What kills us, it seems like very clearly what drains us. What drains us is our identity, identity, because even though what we were talking here in the mood disorder, so if you think about, oh, I'm depressed, I'm not in a good mood, and someone is there who is aware of that bad mood and depressed, you're able to separate yourself, you elevate yourself, the meta consciousness, right? So what does that mean? That means this consciousness, it managed to get out of this. It doesn't mean this is a full answer, because it has its own trap. So at least it managed to get out of this current issue. So once you're here, maybe this is not a bad thing, a smiling one. This is a depressed one. So I can live with the smiling one, but not with this one, right? So you're just staying with the smiling one, but if you don't know how to maintain the smiling one, it gets down there too. So you keep on, so it's the layers of thoughts, what we call, in the Dharma teaching, they call it Sangtok Tangyantok. So they say, they give an example, white cloud or black cloud. It's a cloud obscure the sun. So it doesn't matter what kind of color of cloud it is. It both does the same thing. Maybe one does a little bit better, one does obscures more. But they're both clouds. So these all are clouds. So some point, when we talk about becoming a subtler and subtler and subtler, so some point there's no matter or lower consciousness, it's just one single consciousness. Then that's it. That's where you arrive. So, and maybe the mainstream psychology, I don't think they don't talk about that, right? So one day they might, because the whole idea of meta consciousness is coming from some sense of all these traditions, Eastern traditions, right? I think it's developed there.
Sat-Bir, I feel that you're ready to speak.
So speaking of modern psychology and these contemplative sciences coming into mainstream society, we have what's been going on over the past 10 years, this huge surge in the field of psychology and understanding mindfulness, which is this meditative process. And it is a field in and of itself. People are studying mindfulness, they're studying how to engage it, they're studying the effects of mindfulness practice. So it really has become a part and parcel of modern psychology. In fact, no respecting psychotherapist these days is not applying some degree of mindfulness type therapies. So this really is starting to come into the field of psychology. But I wanted to come back to something on the topic of longevity. And I'm not sure what scripture this is in, but I've heard many times that it's said that our life is not how many days we live, but how many breaths we breathe. Now, there's actually a scientific rationale behind that. So in other words, the explanation here is that if you breathe faster, you're going to die sooner, because you're using up your breaths faster, right? And if you breathe more slowly, you're going to live longer because you're using up those breaths less quickly. Now, the scientific rationale that really makes sense here is that people with higher respiratory rates typically are expressing higher levels of chronic stress. Now, chronic stress is really at epidemic proportions in modern society. It is at huge levels in our children and adolescents. And that level of chronic stress has direct effects on virtually every system in the mind and on the body. It is completely pervasive. It's toxic to nerve cells. It kills off nerve cells. It's the major driver for mood disturbances like depression and anxiety. The problem is that our modern society does not teach stress management. It's not part of the school curriculum. So the poor kid comes to the teacher and says, you know, I'm under stress, what do I do? And the teacher says, yeah, this job's stressing me out, I'm quitting the profession. And the patient comes to the doctor and says, man, I'm stressed out, I can't take it. The doctor says, yeah, I'm burned out, I'm leaving the profession. It's just not there. And so this whole idea of these contemplative practices, like yoga and like Tai Chi, Qigong, these are critical because the major outcome of these practices, as soon as you start practicing them, is this improvement in stress tolerance and stress regulation. So it really is a solution to that epidemic of chronic stress, and that is going to impact longevity. I mean, these are risk factors for all the major diseases. And we're talking about NCDs, non-communicable diseases. These are at epidemic levels. People are getting type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension at unimaginable percentages compared to 100 years ago. And I think a large part of it is due to this inability to manage stress.
Yeah. Menpa, where's stress within the Tibetan medical system? How do you talk about stress? And is there a specific word actually in Tibetan on stress? I don't know, but and how is it dealt from the Tibetan medicine perspective?
Stress, 그렇게 얘기하잖아.
너무 인지게를 스트레스 내지도
눈쇼.
베베게 매게 나라 책인데 스트레스 내야 되는데 여러 가지 안티 간대잖아요. 좀 그랬어.
No. I think we maybe I'm not sure it's correct words or not, but we use nunshuk. Nun means it's sort of like pressure. I think it's
we actually exact word I don't know we have.
Yeah.
Stress.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Come to Tibet, the stress.
Burnout we don't have for sure.
Burnout you don't have.
Yeah, I think now, at least when we're writing the patient chart, we write like a nunshuk. Nunshuk is like a pressure, sort of like stress. I think this, to release the pressure, I think it's a lot of impact with also society, family members, societies, neighbors. Yeah, in general, I think everything could be in fact sort of like involved to one thing. But also sometimes, what I see in the stress, sometimes there is a issue to be stressed because the co-workers or family members or boss or whatever is too tight, you know, like everything wants to be done like a machine way. The other is a human, so human not manage to running same speed as like a machine. Something, this is sort of like many people telling this is one issue. But sometimes there is not really such a huge reason to be stressed. If there is two ends, then it's already is stressed, you know. So this kind of, there are something issues. One, there's not really issues, just mentally made up. Today, what I see is there's a lot of people who complaining stressful thing. There's no really, when I'm talking, there's no really a reason to be that huge issues, you know. If there is one cup of coffee spilled, that's okay. You can clean up and that's it, you know. But this is also putting into a huge issue, sort of like, oh, maybe now I have nerve disease because of this. Maybe I have brain tumors. This kind of, I think, is sort of like a useless way. But yeah, it's to work on that what I see is a lot of things, also society, family members, and then also the person himself. The best to treat, what I see is the yoga. Yoga and the meditation is the best treatment for that. We give a lot of time as a nutmeg. We say, okay, if you have stress, you take the nutmeg tea, clove tea, cinnamon tea, this tea, that tea. Yes, it is works. But the best one, what I really see is the breathing and the meditation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
And also, it's a massage also very good. Warm compress is good to touch directly certain chakra, working like Songjin chakra or the Kapji chakra, sort of like working with a warm or your compress also works very well.
I remember in the last time you were here, you did some compressions in the. I don't know, some people were here at that conference a few years back.
Yeah.
So, yes. So, you mentioned society, and Rinpoche, you mentioned this yesterday as well. The importance of social support, and there's a lot of literature in this area. You mentioned loneliness as well as the opposite of that. So, particularly in traditional societies, there's much more of social support. People live with family. Sometimes, as you said this morning, in the Tibetan tradition, the in-laws would come and stay 2 months. But this aspect of really support of both the family and having social support really supports health, actually. And we see this in a lot of research. So I wanted to see if anyone, I see also Sat-Bir nodding. I don't know if you want to address it first, because I know you know about this area as well.
Yeah, there's no question that the epidemiological studies show that people who live alone are much more prone to disease and have less longevity and less actually quality of life. So there's a lot to be said for social interaction. We are social animals. Our brains are wired to be interacting socially. And so that's an important part of the way we function. It's just in our genes that we are social animals. One aspect of that I think that's interesting is the whole idea of selfless service, because that requires a social environment to be selfless service to someone else. And this is a very important practice in many Oriental religions. It's certainly a very key practice in Sikh practices, the whole idea of selfless service of the free kitchen, of serving others. And in fact, that can also be, you can imagine that working at this whole level of the ego. Because if you are in this mood disturbance, it's I, me. But when you are in selfless service, you are extending yourself outwards. And so in a way, that is an expansion of consciousness and gets you away from that me to let me help others. And as soon as you engage into that selfless service, that actually is therapeutic. And so I think that's an important part of this whole idea of being humans and having social interaction, is that we can serve others. And of course, in the Buddhist traditions, there's a lot about kindness and compassion, which also takes you out of yourself and towards others.
So can I ask you a question? So I was curious about a little bit about the research findings. So this idea of longevity, the social interaction, social connections being very important. So in some sense, connection is very important with others. So, but then you also think about, like, if you live longer by connecting with others, what about, would you live longer than that if you connect to yourself? Because we have lost connection to ourselves, right? So in some sense, where I see it sometimes is, okay, why you live long by connecting with others? What is the mechanism? What is the reason behind?
Well, I think that's a great question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that, because that's not specifically my field, but I would say that this whole idea of social support, when you interact with somebody else and you share your problems, you share your tribulations, your challenges,
maybe.
you feel better.
Yeah.
And this is also true when you practice this technique called journaling. You simply write something down. It creates an objectivity to that challenge. If you share it with somebody else, now it's no longer just yours. You've shared it. And so that takes down the volume, if you will, of that challenge, of that adversity. And it now becomes a little bit more manageable. And so I think that's one aspect. And of course, there's other aspects of social interaction. Just love and affection can be very nurturing and very healing.
So the question is more like a beyond the social connection with other people. But would there be any, like from the spiritual point of view, reason I'm asking, you're practicing for all your life. So somehow in a deeper sense, the whole purpose of the spiritual journey is to self-realize, to know who you are, connection to yourself.
Right.
So connection to yourself is the ultimate answer. But while we are journeying to trying to find connection to ourselves, when we lost the connection to anybody, at least it's better to be connecting with someone, since you don't have any connection.
I think it's starting to get complicated. I think both aspects are important.
Yeah.
The social interaction has benefits because we are social animals, but the self-realization, the work on yourself. I mean, the whole idea.
No. The benefit is there for sure. I'm not arguing about that. But why is the benefit? But is it like something? The reason behind it is ultimately you're seeking connection to yourself. Are we trying to replace that?
I don't think so. Okay. I think so. For example, in the yoga tradition, for a large part of the yoga tradition, it was renunciate. I mean, these were people that lived in caves. They did not interact with other people. And their goal was to live alone and to experience those deeper states of consciousness.
But they live long also.
They live long also.
So they're not supposed to live long because there's no social.
I think so. So the answer is, I think that both are important. And so we have, now we have, and historically we have yoga ashrams, where you have both. You have the personal practice and you have the sangha or the sangat, the interaction with the community, all working together in that spiritual path. Yeah. So I think both are important.
Maybe they're interacting with the deities that are.
No, I think partly it's true, because in many older generations, you think about, they really have a belief they're not alone. I mean, shamans, they don't think they are alone. They have spirits around all the incredible beings around, walking and dancing and singing. They're not alone. Or the people who believe, when my teacher passed away, he was saying, all the deities around here when he was dying, he never, that sense of loneliness was not there because they believe the presence of the deity, So I think that's one thing, is like you can say, you're believing in that. But deeper sense of that, reason why social connections are important, because there's a loneliness. Would it be possible to not feel lonely at all by people who go to yoga in the cave? They don't have any social connection, but they don't have a negative impact of not having social connection, because why? They don't need.
But maybe it has to do also with what you were talking yesterday about the sacred. It's a sacred connection.
I mean, they have connection to themselves, what I'm saying. So they don't need that connection. When you don't have a connection to yourself, then you need connection to someone.
The connection to others can help the connection.
It's like a substitution a little bit, Like people say, when people are not happy, they stop and eat. That's substitution.
But then again, when we talk about, the three jewels, Sangha is a jewel because there's something about the community, right, that we interact.
Anyways, I think it's fine.
No, but I wanted to talk about sacredness again, because you mentioned yesterday something about sky, and today you mentioned an example that actually I remember being there, when in the first summer retreat we were sky gazing, and someone said, what is there to see to the sky? And partly when you talked about the union of the three, the sky, the eyes, and the heart, it's like there's something that was not there, right? The sacred means that you are actually making that full connection to the heart, And if you don't make it, there's something that is not there. And yes, you see the sky, or as we're saying now with the community, yes, you could be in a community and being alone. So how do we make that click? How do we make that click of really, whether it's through the practices, whether it's by being with people, how do we make that click of bringing it internally? How do we make that click to really connect to that sacredness?
So, like as we were saying about the Western movie, or you can think about, beautiful sky, sunset, right? So of course, when you look at, you go, wow, right? Or people, right, this morning when you're taking picture upstairs, you said, wow, this is the best place to take a picture, right? Wow, right? So that's, you don't have to do anything. You look, wow, right? So when you feel that wow, for sure, with no doubt, that if you internally look inside yourself, you can look, wow. You close your eye and look, wow, is that me? I mean, kind of, right? So you can, for sure you can have that experience. Or when you have an incredible negative thought, you look at yourself also, you think, wow, is that me? You can have the other side too. So, but when you cannot see that spacious, luminous space inside, then that's what they say. You look at the sky. You really look at the sky for 15, 20 minutes. As I was joking with a cup of coffee, nice, you have a cup of coffee, you sit. But little better relationship, just like the not understanding, understanding what is there, its connection, is the power, transformative power, and so on. When you look at that, then you slowly close your eye, you just bring that energy inside. You carry that with yourself. It's here now. We call internalizing elements.
Thank you. Sat-Bir, do you have some of that in the Kundalini yoga tradition as well?
Well, certainly I think all yoga traditions ultimately are geared towards the definition of yoga, which the word means union. I mean, yoga is nothing more than practical mysticism. The goal of achieving through postures, breathing, relaxation, meditation, proper lifestyle is to enabling the brain to achieve these deeper mystical unitive states of consciousness. And the interesting thing about these states of consciousness, it's possible to describe their characteristics. And when we're talking about the word sacredness, that's one word that comes up in studies that have looked at people experiencing this mystical state of consciousness, this unitive transcendental state, is one of the things that they use, the word sacred. Now, the word sacred, how do you define the word sacred? It's a difficult word to define, in my view. It's a sense of something very profound with incredible meaning behind it. And that sort of underlies this term sacredness. But people who have this mystical experience use that term, and it actually has become a question item in the questionnaire on mysticism to quantify whether someone has experienced that mystical state. That term sacredness is there. And it is the sense of that profundity, that there's something special, it's not just an expansive neutral state, it's actually something more profound than that. And that starts to touch on this whole idea of deity without going into that whole direction of deity, but the sense of something really deep and profound that's pervasive in the universe.
Now, you mentioned the brain achieves. Is it the brain? Today we're talking yesterday about kind of mind in the brain and mind in the heart. Is it the brain that achieves it, or?
I think the brain can achieve this, and that's what the goal of these contemplative practices are there to do. They're there to optimize your physiological and psychological functioning to produce the state that allows that state of consciousness to occur. It's almost impossible to make that happen at will, but it's like another state of consciousness, sleep. You cannot just simply say, I'm going to go to sleep and then fall asleep at will. It doesn't work that way. You create the environment that's appropriate for sleep. You've been awake all day, you have sleep drive, you're lying down, Your eyes are closed, there's no noise, there's no light. That is the optimum condition, and you fall asleep. And I think the same thing happens with this state of mystical consciousness. You create the environment physiologically, psychologically, so the central nervous system is set, and those networks in the brain that are responsible for that experience activate, and boom, you're there. And one of the reasons we know that that is the case is some really fascinating research that's been done with hallucinogens, particularly studies with psilocybin. 40% of the people in these studies experience that unitive state of consciousness. And in describing their experience, it's identical to all the experiences that have been described by the mystics throughout history.
What is it?
Psilocybin, it's a mushroom.
Okay.
That.
So what is the common experience that everybody shares?
So what they, what 40% of them experience is that unitive state, the samadhi state.
Okay.
It's identical to the mystical experience in every way. And, they've done follow-up studies, for example, where they bring these people back a year later and it's still the most remarkable experience they've ever had in their lives. And it's changed their perspective on life. It's changed their goals in life in the same way that it happens with people that are practicing contemplative practices.
So next time we need to have a mushroom then.
No.
It's very neutral.
That's where I draw the line. And it's been said that this artificial way of achieving these states, it may be good as an introduction to this existence of this state, but as a regular way to induce this, no. I think that's fraught with difficulties. It's been said that when you do that artificially with these substances, you actually take away the brain's ability to achieve these states on its own. You don't just get this for free. You have to earn it. And you have to earn it with contemplative practice. Contemplative practice is spiritual work. And there's no shortcuts. And so this may be a window that opens you to the possibility of this, and then can change your life trajectory towards contemplative practices, but it's not the solution.
So what you're saying, to make sure I understand, is that it might be useful for some to get the experience, so then through the practice, you can get back and be familiar back to that experience that you had.
Yeah, absolutely. It's once you have that experience, you've opened the box and you've seen what true reality is. And once you've opened that box and experienced that depth, there's no going back. You can't go back and close the door anymore. You've seen it. And you then say, I want to go in that direction if you go on that spiritual path. And, that's what happened in this very, I would say, sacred time in the late 60s and early 70s, when all of the counterculture was experiencing these substances. That morphed into, from communes and hippies, that morphed into spiritual communities and yoga practice. That's why all of these yoga masters came from India in the late 60s and early 70s. We had Swami Satchidananda giving a lecture at Woodstock. I mean, people were practicing Kundalini yoga at Woodstock. And so that was a very special time where that whole transition had meaning.
So Rinpoche, do you see this, in our tradition, we have the mutra, right? The direct introduction. So would you think that this would be something similar that gives you that experience and then you can get back to it? I know it's not usually within our tradition, but I just want to...
Yeah, I think, as Sat-Bir said, more like direct introductions, you set up a right circumstances, there's a teacher, there's a student, there's a kind of relationship, depth of relationship, both knows what the journey is about, and then there is a practice, then there is a deep sense of the journey is so important, they call motor, right? So yeah, I always tell this story when I was in Tibet. Then this group of monks, they knew I came from many monasteries. They asked me to do a Dzogchen teaching at the time. I said, no, they're all older people. And I said, I cannot do it. And then I said, okay, only way I can do it, it's all you share your experiences, then I will give feedback. So they close the door, they close the window, and they have a guard outside. Nobody can come in. Then everybody's sharing their experiences. Then I shared a little bit, give my feedback. Then after I came out, one older monk with the half blind, he came and held my hand. He said, "Thank you so much. Now I know what to do the rest of my life." Right? So that's the relationship. It's not like it doesn't happen for me during the weekend doing some seminar workshop and somebody comes out to say, "Thank you for telling me this. I have know what to do the rest of my life." I have never heard that. Right? So it's a whole set understanding is very, very different to have that experience. And the value, what does it mean? That kind of value is very important here.
Yes. So I want to, in the last few minutes, this aspect of ego and lack of ego in the space. And also in medicine, we were saying, Menpa, that the root cause of all illnesses is ignorance, right? So if we think of ego in a way, this marikpa, this ignorance, and rikpa being kind of awareness without that. So how is ignorance the root of all illnesses? How do you see it from a Tibetan medical perspective?
Yeah, so what we say is if we search each one disease, every single disease, we can find their own cause. But if we go to look at why those causes coming from, it's a unique one cause, which is we call the marikpa. And also they said it's giving one like a metaphor. They say if there is ego with the birds, he can fly very high and very far, but no matter where they goes, always his own shadow follows him or her, whatever. Same like that way, does not matter where we go, which country we go, which neighborhood we live, which kind of job we find, which kind of lifestyle we have, our three poison is within us. There's nothing to do. So the best what we can do is to acknowledge that and be aware of that. So now I can see we're talking a lot of disease connected with the diet. Some people say vegan diet is the best, that's for sure. Someone said, no, vegetarian is good, that's for also sure. Someone said, no, it's just eat meat, that's the best, that's also for sure. So, there's a lot of things. But what we can do first, you observe who you are, which kind of body you have, which kind of lifestyle you have, which climate you are living, which kind of job you have, which kind of lifestyle you have. Based on your own condition, now you choose one diet for you. That your neighbor's diet may not going to work for you because it's to different body, to different age, to different, like the jobs or whatever. So this, to follow your own diet, need to be aware, no? So first you need to understand which kind of body I have, then I need to choose one. That also not enough because season is changing, age is changing, everything is changing. So once the outside is changing, we need to remember, new adopt. Winter comes, wear one jacket, summer comes, take off. So all those sort of like lifestyle, what we're adopting is based on our own system. To do that, we need awareness. So awareness or ignorance, antidote ignorance need to be aware. Aware could be many things. To achieve enlightened, for sure need awareness to control the three poison things. To keep healthy also we need awareness to watch your diet things. So I think this to see the root of the disease, ignorance, in the medicine do very well. And then also the medicine we say is Tuksum Neze Sangye Mengela, so like a Buddha of medicine, he able to conquer all these three poison root of the disease. So I think this that the root of this three disease, whatever this three poison connected with ignorance, if we able to be aware with ignorance, I think that can be many things. So conclusion is, I think this awareness could be many different levels, which field we are talking. Just walking from here need to be aware, and otherwise fell down and it could twisted the feet. So everything need to be aware. That part, I think, it's don't ignore it.
Thank you. Are you ready to say something, Sat-Bir?
Yeah, just the idea of ego and disease reminds me of an anecdote, and I'm pretty sure the attribution's correct. It was something that Dean Ornish, yoga researcher, said about his teacher, Swami Satchidananda. Went up to the blackboard and wrote the word illness. And then below that, he wrote the word wellness. And then he went, and on the word illness, he circled the letter I. And under the term wellness, he circled the letter W-E, we. And that really summarized this whole idea of ego and expanded ego consciousness, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you. So I wanted to conclude, Rinpoche. Today, for some people, it might be new, the dedication that we did. And the last line says, in liberating my own being, may I benefit others. And so since we're talking about ego, and if you want to say something about that line as we conclude this panel today.
Yeah, so in many situations that we always wait for someone to change, wait for someone to take the first step, wait for someone to listen to you. So it's always someone. So I think liberating my own being means it's willing to change myself first. So I think just, I'm not going to wait anybody to change anything. If I want in this relationship of any conflict, I'm willing to change first. I think that commitment, I think it feels very important. And as far as the taming ego is concerned, is important. As far as actually succeeding the connection seems important, because when you open up, everybody opens up. When you close and wait other to open, they don't open, they know you're not opening. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you, Sat-Bir. Thank you, Menpa.
Thank you for listening to the Cyber Sangha podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Cyber Sangha, visit us online at cybersangha.net.